Hi guys, today's lesson is going to be on factoring using the distributive property. So this first section kind of gives you an example and gives you some information about what we're getting ready to do. In particular, this box right here kind of reviews for you the difference between multiplying and factoring. So factoring is the opposite of multiplication. There are two different ways we're going to factor. The easiest is this first one where you're just factoring out the greatest common factor. And then the second one is factoring by grouping. Okay, so why don't you pause the video and read through this information on your own first. Great. So we're going to go ahead and do some practice on our own. So I want you to look first at number 1. And number 1, and all the directions are the same, factor each polynomial. So we've got 24x plus 48y. So if I'm looking at these two terms, I'm thinking about the greatest common factor between these two terms. So I can't factor out any variables because one term has an x, the other has a y. So I'm just going to think about the greatest common factor between 24 and 48. So I know that 2 is a factor of both of those numbers. Also know 8 is a factor of both of those numbers. So I'm going to factor an 8 out. If I pull an 8 out of 24x, that leaves me with 3x. If I pull an 8 out of 48y, that leaves me with 6y. Okay, so I actually see that I could pull out another number because 3 and 6, I can factor out a 3 out of those. So that's going to leave me with 8 times 3, and that would be x plus y. Well, 8 times 3 is 24, so let's back up. I could have pulled a 24 out of both of them, couldn't I? And that would be x plus, what is that, 2y? Because 24 times 2 is 48, so I should have noticed that one right off. So if I go back and use my distributive property, 24 times x is 24x, 24 times 2y is 48y. So this is it. I have factored this polynomial. Let's look at number 4. We've got to factor out, factor 9x squared minus 3x. So if I look at each of these factors, each of these terms, I can take a 3x out of both. So if I take a 3x out, what's that going to leave me with? 9x squared. So 3x times what is 9x squared? In other words, 3x. And 3x times what is 3x? 1. Then go back and double check this. If I do 3x times 3x, I get 9x squared. If I do 3x times negative 1, I get negative 3x. So that's it. All right, let's look at number 7. This time I've got 1, 2, 3 terms that I'm trying to factor out. Well, I see all the terms have c's, so I know I can factor out, looks like c cubed. So I can take a c cubed out for sure. I also see 14, 42, and 49. Well, I know that 7 is a factor of 14, of 42, and of 49. So I'm going to actually factor out a 7c cubed. So if I factor 7c cubed out of 14c cubed, that's going to leave me with just a 2. If I take 7c cubed out of negative 42c to the 5th, well, let's take it one step at a time. If I take a 7 out of negative 42, that leaves me with negative 6. And if I take c cubed out of c to the 5th, that would leave me with c squared. Then I'm going to take 7c cubed out of 49c to the 4th. So that would be negative 7c. And then you can double check. If I multiply 7c cubed by everything in the parentheses, I would get what I started off with. Okay, let's try number 10. So each of these terms has an x. The most x's I can pull out is just the 1. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then I see 4, 12, and 16. Well, 4 is a factor of all of those. So I'm actually going to pull out a 4x. If I factor a 4x out of 4x, that doesn't leave me with 0. It leaves me with 1. If I factor a 4x out of 12x squared, that leaves me with 3x plus 3x. And I'm going to take a 4x out of 16x cubed. So that's going to leave me with 4x squared. That's it. Okay, now let's look at 13. Now this one, there are four terms here, and they don't all have an x. I can't pull an x out of all of them. I also couldn't pull like a 2 or anything out of all of them. Okay, so I have to do this one by grouping. So if you just look at it, let's just look at this and this. Okay, so I've divided it up into 2 groups. If I just look at this first pair, I can take an x out of that first pair. So I'm going to take an x out. That leaves me with x plus 2. Okay, and so this one is already saying x plus 2. There's nothing I can take out of that, which means I could take out a 1, right? Okay, this is where it gets tricky. Do you see that this and this are the same? So I'm going to take, okay, this is a product of factors and this is a product of factors. In each of those circles, I'm going to take out x plus 2. Keep it in parentheses. If I take x plus 2 out of here, I'm left with x. If I take x plus 2 out of here, I'm left with plus 1. So that means that this can be factored into x plus 2 times x plus 1. That's what this factors into. So I factored it by grouping. And you can double check if I multiply this back out, I'm going to end up with x squared plus 2x plus x plus 2. Okay, let's try another one. This one's tricky. So I need to factor it by grouping. So let's just try and group these 2 together and these 2 together and see what we can come up with. So here I can take an x out of both terms and a 3. So I'm going to factor out 3x. If I take 3x out of here, that leaves me with 4a. If I take 3x out of here, it just leaves me with 1z or z. So plus z. Here I can take y, and that's it, out of both terms. So I'm going to take out a y, and this plus sign, I brought it straight down. Okay? Okay, so if I factor a y out of here, that leaves me with 4a. If I factor out a y here, I'm left with z. Okay, so this is what you want. Do you see that this pair and this pair, they both have that 4a plus z? So now I'm going to factor again, okay? So out of this one, both of them, I'm going to take a 4a plus z out. If I take 4a plus z out of here, I'm left with just 3x. If I take 4a plus z out of here, which I already have, I'm left with just a plus y. So this can be factored into 4a plus z times 3x plus y. So I know that problems 13 and 16, those will be more challenging maybe than the previous types of problems. All right, but I want you to try some on your own now. So I want you to try 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, and 17. And then you can skip over this last column. You don't have to do that last column. So go ahead, pause the video, and do that middle column now. Okay guys, welcome back. So I want you to check over your answers. So you can see 2, 5, 8, and 11. So go ahead and pause the video and check those now. Okay, and then let's look at 14 and 17. So pause the video and check over those. Okay, great. I'm thinking that you might have a question about number 17, and this minus sign kind of messes everything up. So hopefully you notice that if you ignore the signs, you can take a 2 out, right? So if you take a 2 out, if you bring that minus down, remember you're really factoring out a negative 2. So negative 2 times 4a, right? That gives me that minus 8a. So you probably got the 4a right, but right here you might have the wrong sign. If I do negative 2 times positive 1, that gives me a negative 2. So this should be a plus 1 right here, not a minus 1. And since it's a plus 1, then you can factor out the 4a plus 1, leaving you with the 3a minus 2. Okay? If you've got questions or need more clarification, certainly see me. Also, even though I told you to skip the last column, you're certainly welcome to go over those yourself and work on those for additional practice. Okay, we're going to go to the next page. So this time, we're just solving the equations by factoring. So again, they give you an example. So let's go ahead and pause the video and read over that. Great. Okay, so that zero product property, if you are multiplying two numbers and you get an answer of 0, what does that mean about the two numbers? It means that one of the numbers was 0 or either they were both 0, right? Okay, well, when you're factoring numbers, like when we go back on this other page, when we're factoring, let's look at number 17 again. When we're factoring, this is a product, right? This is one expression, and that represents a final number. If we knew what A was, we would know, right? And this is an expression representing a different number. So this is two factors, 1, 2. Each set of parentheses is a factor, okay? So when I go over here, and I want you to look at number 1, it says to solve each equation and check your solution. So we've got two factors here, x times x plus 3, and that's equal to 0. Well, that means that either x is equal to 0 or x plus 3 is equal to 0. One of those, or either both of those, must be true. Well, if x plus 3 is 0, then that means x must be negative 3. I just solved that equation. So there are two possible answers here for x, either negative 3 or 0. And the reason I put the negative 3 first is I just went in order numerically. So there are two solutions to this equation, two answers. Up until now, you've only solved equations with either one answer, one solution. You have also had equations where there were infinitely many or no solution. Well, guess what? Now you've got equations with two solutions, potentially. Look at number 4. We're going to go straight down. Again, you've got two factors. You've got 3x is a factor and 2x minus 1 is a factor. And then they're multiplying together to give you 0. Well, that means that either 3x is equal to 0 or, and you do need to write the word or 2x minus 1 is equal to 0. So now I have two simple equations. If 3x is equal to 0, then x must be 0. If 2x minus 1 is equal to 0, then I get that 2x is equal to 1, and x would be 1/2. So my two solutions here are 0 and 1/2. I'm going to make that 0 look better. So those are my solutions, 0 and 1/2. Both of those would make this equation here true. All right, let's look at number 7. They've already factored this, haven't they? We've got 2 factors, and it said equal to 0. So either 4c plus 2 is 0, or 2c minus 7 is 0. One or both are true. So I'm going to solve each one. 4c plus 2, so that'd be 4c equals negative 2, which means c is equal to negative 2/4, which is negative 1/2. If I solve the other one, 2c minus 7, then 2c equals 7. C would be 7/2, and we're going to leave it as an improper fraction. So the solutions are either negative 1/2 or positive 7/2. That's it. Okay. Now, number 10, this equation is not set equal to 0. How could I get it so that it was equal to 0? Well, if I add 6x on both sides, remember they're not like terms, so that'd be 12x squared plus 6x. And then on the right side, I'd be left with nothing or 0. Okay, the previous problems, they were already factored for you. Can you factor this one? Sure you can, just like we did before on the previous page. So we can factor out 6x, leaving me with 2x plus 1. All right, so now I've got 2 choices. I'll have to write it here. Either 6x equals 0 or 2x plus 1 is 0. Well, so that means x is 0 or 2x equals negative 1. So my solutions are 0 and negative 1/2. I'm going to put them in order. Okay, let's try 13. Again, this one is not set equal to 0. But if I add the 2x on both sides, then I can set it equal to 0. So you've not solved equations with x squared in them before, at least not where the x squared canceled out in those equations. But now the x squared doesn't cancel out, right? So I'm going to factor out x squared plus 2x. So that'd be x times x plus 2. So now I've got 2 factors. And this would work if you had 3 factors also. So either x is 0 or x plus 2 is 0. Well, if x plus 2 is 0, then we're at negative 2. So my solutions are negative 2 and 0. That's it. Make sure you're writing the brackets like you see me doing and not parentheses here. So if you were to write a parentheses here like that, that would be an ordered pair. And that's not what this is. Let's do one more. So for this one, 12x equals 3x squared. I'm going to, let's subtract the 3x squared. It doesn't matter. Okay. Now I can factor out a 3x. So that'd be 4 minus x equals 0. So either 3x is 0 or 4 minus x is 0. I'm going to get rid of that so I can write over the top of it. Okay. So then x is 0 there. This would be negative x equals negative 4, which means x would be positive 4. So my solutions are 0 and 4. Okay. So now it's going to be your turn. I'm going to have you do like we did on the previous page. You can just do this middle column. So 2, 5, 8, 11, 14, and 17. And then go ahead and write the word skip across that third column. So let's pause the video and do that middle column now. Okay, let's check over your answers, guys. So you should be able to see problems 2, 5, and 8. So let's pause the video and check those now. Okay, and then 11, 14, and 17. Go ahead and check over those. Okay, guys, so if you've got questions about anything, you didn't understand something, please see me so that I can help you. If you haven't already done so, you need to make any necessary corrections. Make sure that you've shown your work for these problems as well, just as you've seen me do here. Okay, so once you're finished, go ahead and turn this in and start on your independent practice.